you have a kind of a la carte menu with many of the main companies to choose what you want in terms of availability, scalability, reliability, backups, security. Many companies don't want to invest a great deal of time, money, and effort into the infrastructure. They want a tool that works consistently so that they can focus on their marketing and on their product and on their customers. Of course, everyone wants recurring revenue, but it also allowed the developer to provide ongoing services and upgrades to the extension so that you wouldn't have to worry too much about whether it would break on the next update.
So when it comes to e-commerce platform, what would you rather have? Speed or flexibility? This episode addresses exactly when you should opt for speed and agility and when flexibility is of utmost importance. It's a great episode you do not want to miss, so do stay tuned. Hi 2Xers, welcome to the 2X e-commerce podcast show. I'm your host Kunle Campbell. The 2X e-commerce podcast show is dedicated to digital commerce insights for retail and e-commerce teams. Each week on this podcast, we interview a commerce expert, a founder of a digital native consumer brand, or representative from a best-in-class commerce SaaS product. We give them a very tight remit to help you give you ideas you can test right away on your brand so you can improve commerce growth metrics such as conversions, average order value, repeat customers, your audience size, and ultimately your gross merchant value or sales. We are here to help you sell more sustainably. Now, speaking of which, the episode you're about to listen to is an interview I had with Tim Bucciarelli. He is the Senior Manager of Digital Operations at IronPlane, a full-service e-commerce agency specializing in platform design, development, and digital marketing agency in general. They specialize, from our conversation, predominantly on the Adobe platform, BigCommerce, and a few other platforms. But the core is the Adobe platform and BigCommerce Enterprise, I believe. With the Adobe, we really talked about just a breakdown of the infrastructure right there, right now, which is Adobe Cloud, Magento Open Source, and Adobe Commerce. We talked a lot about migrations. You know what you should consider from an agility standpoint, and then from a flexibility standpoint. So if you're looking for flexibility, for instance, in the checkout experience, then certain SaaS platforms may not be the best for you. But if you're looking for agility, then SaaS, some off the shelf SaaS solutions might be ideal for you. We don't talk about replatforming enough in this podcast, and that's because there's so much in the sphere of marketing, finance, and operations we should be talking about in this podcast. So this is a breath of fresh air. You'll be listening to this on a Saturday. It's a bonus episode for you to just get your head around platforming from someone who is deep into in the trenches in that space. So if you are an e-commerce director or you're an e-commerce manager or you're thinking about replatforming in general, this episode might be the one for you. There are other very specialist podcasts around replatforming, like the Replatform podcast hosted by James Gerd, who's a friend of mine. You can check it out. But this particular episode really speaks to the Adobe and BigCommerce versus all the other options out there. He is a very well-versed individual in e-commerce platforming. He's an e-commerce expert in his own right. So enjoy this episode, and if you haven't already, do us a favor and follow us and potentially leave us a review on whatever podcasting platform you listen to the 2X e-commerce podcast. I shall leave you and I will catch you on the other side. So enjoy this conversation I had with Tim. Cheers. Hello, Tim. Welcome to the 2X e-commerce podcast. It's an absolute pleasure having you on the show. before we dig right into what we're about to talk to, I really want to know more about you. You're at Iron Plate right now, but prior to Iron Plate, what led you into the world of e-commerce, as we know it today.
Well, I shifted actually pretty seamlessly over. I was actually an IronPlane client prior to joining IronPlane, and I helped manage an e-commerce business in specialty food, where we shipped imported fine foods all over the country. And I was in that business for about 16 years, most recently, and worked in all manner of e-commerce areas, including digital marketing, social media, a little bit of direct mail, as well as the operations side of the pick, pack, and ship, customer service, returns management. So really, it was a small business operation with pretty extensive reach and very dedicated customer base. The transition to IronPlane was very natural for me. I was very involved in the technology of our business, as well as in the food and the products. And so, what I like to believe is that I bring a little bit of both perspectives to our current clients at IronPlane.
Interesting, interesting. So, would you say you're very much in an operations and technology, expert?
Yes, I would say those are my two specialties. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, okay, interesting, interesting. Um, so you're doing operations in tech for retail business, for commerce business, and your now agency side. How do both worlds sort of compare? What is the key difference?
Well, I think when I moved over to the agency side, similarly, it's a smaller agency. So I'm very comfortable wearing a number of hats in that environment. And I really love learning new skills, as do you, I know, with all of your podcasts and learning each one. I think that my goal is to take the perspective that I learned as an e commerce manager and inform my interactions with our clients. So I do a lot of work with our sales team right now. I also do a lot of work with our internal operations, the technologies that we choose to use to support our business, and also in the client management and account management, working with our clients.
Okay. Do you want to sort of break down what you do at IronPlane, please?
Sure. So I've built out, for example, the CRM tool and marketing automation tool that we use. It's called HubSpot. Most of your listeners would have heard of it, I'm sure.
Mm.
I also have coordinated our outbound sales efforts and also our inbound sales efforts. We have recently started shifting a little bit more towards um, the demand generation model rather than the
Mm.
more traditional lead generation model. There's a subtle distinction,
Mm.
but it's an important one. So that's one thing that I'm working on right now with our marketing team.
What's the main difference between demand generation and lead generation?
Well, you think of a lead as a lead. It's a single entity that just comes to you, and you can, um, hope for the best, and you can, dial by numbers, and with a huge volume, you generate a lot of leads. But it doesn't really capture the qualitative element, whether they have any intent, and all you're thinking about is top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom funnel, and you're just pushing them through and hoping for the best. Obviously, there's a
Mm.
lot of skill there as well, but demand generation is really working to create value for a broad audience. And
Mm.
essentially, what it feels like to me is you're trusting in the value of what you are offering, that people who at the right time and in the right space will reach out to you. So demand generation is
Mm.
really getting your brand out there, getting your name out there, getting the value proposition out there to a broad audience, and just being as open as you can and available as you can to people who might have some interest in what you do.
Interesting. There are parallels to be drawn in the B2C world, or even B2B e-commerce. From a value creation, or your value proposition rather, what is the most efficient, or what are the most efficient methods of value of just disseminating your value proposition to the broad market without breaking the bank?
I think the first obvious path is your existing customers. Whether you're B2B or B2C, your existing customers are an invaluable resource of both advisory, how can you make what you're offering better, but also recurring purchase. So whether it's a subscription or whether it's just a recurring purchase, they need to renew every year. Um, your existing customer base should be your first step. And that's the least expensive way for you to go about getting new sales and getting input from them in terms of how you can improve. Beyond that, for us in the B2B space, it's a lot of, speaking to people, networking at conferences. It's also being on podcasts like your podcasts, and also starting to generate a lot of our own content on our YouTube channel, as well as we will be launching shortly our own podcast.
Okay. And it sounds to me like it's this convergence of content and events and networking in a way where you create a community, virtual or in person, um, from that wide market, reach with your value proposition, I guess.
It is, and saying it, I think, belies the challenge, because this is essentially what many different companies are trying to do now. So the field is very full of people doing podcasts and webinars and
Mm-hmm.
video content on YouTube or Vimeo. So how can you really get your message out and your value proposition out? That's an ongoing challenge. We like to think that we live in a sweet spot as an agency of size, where our level of service is much greater than you would find in other larger agencies. That's the way that
Mm-hmm.
we like to think about it. And similarly, focusing on the quality of the development work,
Mm-hmm.
where we don't have huge numbers of clients, and every client we do have, we deliver extremely high quality.
Mm. And I think this building in public um, approach, both from an e-commerce and a B2B standpoint, seems to be delivering returns, just from a brand reach perspective. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about what you guys do in IronPlane. So you're an Adobe agency. Do you want to break down what your agency actually does, to the audience, please?
Sure. So, yeah, we are an Adobe partner, and we started out building Magento websites on the Magento open source platform, which is all that existed when it first started. And since then, the Magento platform was purchased by eBay and then eventually Adobe, I think in 2014. And Adobe is in the process of, and has done a great deal to improve the platform. They moved it from version 1 onto version 2 now, and subsequently they're now shifting it to become a little bit more integrated with their experience platform. So Magento has become what is now called Adobe Commerce. So there's actually 3 different paths that you can take if you want to work within the Adobe Commerce world or Magento world. One is Magento open source, one is Adobe Commerce, and one is Adobe Commerce Cloud. So the cloud means that it's basically Adobe hosting your Adobe Commerce site. Open source is where you have a lot more flexibility to build it as you need. And Adobe may or may not, other than being the platform provider, may or may not be involved in what you're doing day to day. So a lot of our clients are on the open source platform. We have several right now on the cloud platform as well, and several also on the commerce platform. So we focus on designing and developing Magento or Adobe Commerce websites. And more recently, we've also been focused on migrations. So if clients are coming to us and they're on a different platform and they want to migrate over to Magento, we help them migrate that existing data and that existing e-commerce experience over to the Magento platform. Further, we also work with our clients to optimize. If they are currently on Magento, but maybe they have a partner who has decided to no longer support them, or they chose that they're not the best quality service, then they come to us and we can help them through what we call a Magento rescue. We take it over and we can help them optimize their Magento e-commerce platform.
Okay, interesting. So Magento open source is Magento, essentially. Is that right?
Exactly.
Where you have the source code, and then you build. So it's self-hosted, right?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah.
What sort of businesses, just prefer to go open source? And what happened to Magento Enterprise?
That's now Adobe Commerce. Yes. Okay. So the Enterprise Edition, the EE, is now Adobe Commerce. Yeah.
Okay. Makes sense. So with the open source, what sort of e-commerce operations tend to embrace the open source platform?
I think it's interesting because you would sometimes think, well, the Adobe Commerce platform is like a step up, right? Maybe Adobe has built in more sophisticated functionality out of the box on that platform, the Adobe Commerce platform. And you might think Magento open source is maybe like maybe the older or less functional version. But it's actually a lot of enterprise businesses who want total control over their e-commerce, and they want to own all of their code, and they want complete control over the hosting environment as well. Magento open source is a great candidate for those companies, because then they have complete control from start to finish in their e-commerce platform. Adobe Commerce is not too far different. It's still quite customizable, but you are paying then Adobe for a license fee to take the benefit of the additional functionality that's built into the commerce portion.
Okay, so just to clarify, with the Magento open source, you are hosting it yourself, and with Adobe Commerce, you're hosting it yourself.
Yes. So both of those platforms, you can either host it on-prem in your own facility if you have the resources to do that, or you can outsource the hosting to any number of hosting companies. There are several companies who specialize in the Magento platform and who provide great quality service. But yes, it is hosted. Now, the hosting itself can be cloud hosting, the virtual hosting that's very popular with AWS or Google or Azure. Or it could be on, a shared server or a dedicated server, an actual piece of hardware. So the hosting can vary quite a bit, but the idea, as you said, is exactly right. Both Adobe Commerce and Magento open source are hosted platforms.
Yeah. So with the rise of I'll ask that question. So Adobe Cloud, is that an entry level product?
No, that's like the top level. Basically, it depends on how connected you want to be with Adobe, essentially. So Adobe Commerce gives you more out of the box functionality, especially in regards to B2B and the latest technology that Adobe has crafted into the Adobe Commerce platform. you're going to get
into the cloud.
well, Adobe Commerce in general, both cloud and not
Okay.
cloud. But the cloud
Okay.
puts it more in Adobe's control to support you, because then they are hosting it for you. So it's really that becomes a little bit more of this kind of idea of one-stop shop, where you're working with Adobe, who is providing you with the technology to support your e-commerce operations through the platform, and then also they're hosting it. So if you have any questions, if you have any needs, you can go to Adobe and they'll deal with it for you. However, it's important to recognize that most of the time you still need an agency who can go in there and do the customizations for you and do,
Oh yeah,
all the work that Adobe
definitely,
doesn't want to do.
definitely. Yeah. So what's the cost of ownership with the cloud?
I think, well, first of all, as with anything that's published anywhere, you go and talk to the company themselves. They give you a quote that is specific to your company's needs. And sometimes they'll be willing to give you quite a deal. Sometimes it's just rack rates. But generally, from what I know, Adobe Commerce, you pay a monthly subscription fee. Let's say it's around 2,000 US. And then if you're also being hosted in their cloud environment, it could be an additional 1,000 or 2,000 on top of that per month.
Okay, so not too bad, not too bad at all.
Right.
So I guess it begs the question: if with the rise of cloud-based e-commerce hosting solutions, here and there, some are public, some are about to go public. Why is there still a need for on-prem, using your terminology, solutions like Magento open source, or even a non-Adobe hosted Adobe Commerce platform? In the sense, because I remember, or I still have access to, some Magento stores that have crashed as a result, that is hosted. Magento sites have crashed as a result of unprecedented amounts of traffic. There are also potential security. Basically, you need a developer, to support, self-hosted, solution. So why are organizations still embracing open source and self-hosted solutions? Is it a thing that's going, and is a cloud or SaaS the way forward?
I think I would split it out a little bit into maybe three categories. One category is the open source, and maybe put that off to the side just for a moment. Regarding the hosting, I think it is extremely rare for a company to choose to do their own hosting. It's become very, very rare these days, and for good reason, because the availability, the scalability, the redundancy of cloud hosted environments has come so far over the past 10 years. I suspect that there still are companies who want the control, but those companies who are doing the on-premise hosting themselves, they have a number of resources to manage it. It's not just one developer; it's a team of database architects and network security people. So these are larger companies who, for whatever reason, whether it's privacy or security, or want their own control over their own platform. But again, I'm just a little bit hypothesizing, because it's so rare these days that anyone really wants to take that on themselves. The next one is the hosting, where you're giving it off to someone else, and again, you've got a variety of hosting options there, and most of them are going to be offering you, as you scale up, a great deal of scalability and reliability, and redundancy. You have a kind of a la carte menu with many of the main companies to choose what you want in terms of availability, scalability, reliability, backups, security. all of which I think are pretty affordable these days. When you look at AWS, for example, and the pricing that AWS is offering for their hosting.
So, what are your thoughts on SaaS, or platform as a service? No, actually, SaaS e-commerce platforms versus PaaS, or platform as a service, e-commerce platforms. How, where do you see the future? So and I'll just give you my perspective. I do think that a lot of organizations are starting to rethink technology, and they're starting to embrace, and we're talking quite significant organizations. They're starting to really embrace just decoupling themselves from e-commerce infrastructure as much as possible, and focusing on the build, on the functionality, and letting e-commerce platforms such as Adobe, or what have you, or Shopify, sort of sort out all of the technical infrastructure. And that obviously releases resources for them to focus more on um, marketing and customer experience, essentially focusing on rather than having to really try and manage infrastructure, essentially. Do you see this being the direction the entire industry is going, or does this just apply to certain e-commerce or retail organizations um, that have very specific needs?
My perspective is that the market was hungry for SaaS e-commerce, and the market has responded. And it's exactly as you describe. Many companies don't want to invest a great deal of time, money, and effort into the infrastructure. They want a tool that works consistently so that they can focus on their marketing and on their product and on their customers, for sure. So that's why you have the success of Shopify. And more recently, you've got BigCommerce stepping in, but there are several other big players in the SaaS space. I kind of jokingly think of SaaS platforms as, in the US, we have like Kraft mac and cheese. It's a box. So you can have your dinner and you have this very simple box of food, and you can maybe add a few little add-ins later, some broccoli or some ground beef or something, and make it. But it's still essentially this box of food that someone prepared for you, that you're making because it's quick, it's easy, it's affordable. And I think that that's SaaS-based technology like Shopify. And then you've got something that's a little bit more open and allows you to have a little bit more customizability, and that's like the BigCommerce platform. And you can think of that as, like, in the US, we have Blue Apron, for example, which is a brand that sends you a box of food ingredients and recipes. So you have a little bit more creativity in what you can produce, but you're still working within this defined space. Then you've got the world of Magento. Magento is you're going out, you're shopping, you're finding your own ingredients, and you're finding that you have to have the skill, or you have to hire a skilled catering company to prepare custom meal based on what you want. And it can take some more time, but the results can be much more satisfactory. All of those have a really valued space in the market, both for consumers who love food, but also in the space of e-commerce. If you think about it, the SaaS platforms like Shopify are wonderful. They can be very affordable for smaller businesses. They can satisfy all their needs very easily. They're very intuitive to use, and they're rapidly advancing with new technologies all the time. Similar with BigCommerce. I think that what it comes down to for an individual company is taking an honest look at what is the likely total cost of ownership. it's not a slam dunk that Shopify and BigCommerce will be less expensive than Magento. Not at all. If you have revenues over 5-10 million a year, looking at Shopify Pro or Shopify Plus, I think you're going to be doing some pretty serious calculations to see where other platforms might fall. And that being said, Magento requires support of an agency. Magento open source, there's no license fee. You don't pay a monthly fee, but you likely need to pay a partner agency for all of your development work. It's just a different bucket of cost, but when you put it all together, you can see based on your business where your total cost of ownership will be over 5 or 6 years. And I think that's probably the single most calculation a company should do beyond looking at functionality of an e-commerce platform.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's exactly what you want to do, the experience you really want to deliver, which brings me to the topic of headless commerce.
Yes.
Do you want to sort of break down, give a definition of headless commerce for listeners who are not too familiar with the term, please?
From what I understand, it's the idea is that you have a front layer that is independent of many different operations, or what are called microservices, and you connect everything via APIs. So you are able to use whatever platforms you choose, but the top layer stays constant. And so if you are connecting to, let's say, 5 different platforms, so you've got your e-commerce platform, you've got your CRM platform, you've got your PIM, you've got your ERP, let's say, and they're all connected to that top layer via API, these microservices. You can more easily swap in and swap out as long as you can adjust those API connectors with your top layer, and your top layer will stay the same. So it's not like you necessarily have to re-platform everything. It's much more component based, which gives you much more flexibility. I think there's also a little bit of confusion between the idea of PWA and headless, but I think I view them as two pretty separate things. But they're both topics that have been pretty hot topics recently in the past year or so.
Yeah, and I do think that with the emergence of like omni-channel commerce, where people or shoppers essentially do not necessarily, they're almost channel less, in the sense that they could view a YouTube video, and eventually purchase via Instagram, or go in. They're very happy to use display kiosk in stores, self-serve. So you have this commerce engine on the back end that's serving all this new channels, and essentially you have that head just serving commerce in through various front ends, essentially. So whether it's a mobile app, or it's your website, or your a display kiosk at exhibition, or even in store, it's all there, which poses a lot of opportunities. Does Adobe support headless? Is it headless, a headless platform?
Well, I think the beauty of Magento is that it's got its APIs available rather than being a closed system. I think could you do Shopify in a headless scenario? Probably, but you'd probably be very limited in what you can actually do functionally.
Yeah.
Shopify chooses what functions they want to give you, and they'll hide a lot of the other ones. BigCommerce is saying that they have maybe, I think it was like 94% of their functional APIs are exposed, are open for use, which is really impressive. Magento, I think it's fair to say, is 100%. So you can get in
Mm,
and make use of all of the different Magento functions through their APIs.
mm.
So I would say it's a great candidate for headless. Um,
So it's a real modular platform in the full sense, which which enables headless.
yeah, I mean, you would the core of what it would be doing for you is e-commerce. You wouldn't choose
Mm,
Magento to be your CMS, for example. Um,
mm.
I mean, you could, but it would be a
It's not
secondary
very good CMS.
secondary
Hmm.
function to the e-commerce function.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, and again, headless. The costs for going headless have come down in the past 3 or 4 years, um, but still, it's you're going to have to do that calculation for total cost of ownership because there is a fair bit of development work on the front end.
And it's ongoing.
Yes,
It's
that's
ongoing.
right.
It is
Exactly.
ongoing. So you will need a front end developer for your a dedicated front end developer for your app. For your obviously web all the
Yes,
time, and any new platform you bring.
and
But
that's
again, it's really adapting to where your customers are shopping. How they shop.
that's a challenge that we've met several times when
Mm,
the client may not fully understand that it's not a one and done operation when you build an
mm,
e-commerce website, and the amount of resources
mm,
that you put into getting it done in the first place, you will probably need to plan to spend maybe half as much every single year to keep it up and running and optimize it.
mm.
Otherwise, look at a
Yeah,
SaaS platform where you may not have to have you'll have it more kind of baked in and ready to use.
yeah, yeah. And the so I can't quite remember. I was at a virtual conference last November, and I think the consensus there was, start out with a SaaS, scale, see how far you go, and if you kind of want to um, start to get more custom functionality, say you're starting to go omni-channel, you start to open retail stores, that might be a time to start to think about replatforming. When you're expanding your channels essentially, to adjust to the way customers shop. Okay, you did mention PWA, which is progressive
Web app.
web
Yeah.
applications, I
Yeah.
believe. What are the benefits? Do you want to just give a brief definition on why people should be thinking PWA now?
Yeah, I think it's most oftentimes kind of it sits in between two worlds. One is when you think of a website and you think of that website being responsive. What that means is that website will scale whether you're on a desktop monitor or on your tablet or on your phone. And you can kind of mimic this by taking your browser and shrinking it down, and you'll see if the website adjusts and it turns the full menu into a hamburger menu. That's an indication that it's a responsive website. Then on the other side is the app. There are applications that are dedicated to a particular brand, to a particular website, and you open that up and you had to download it, and it operates on your phone whether you're connected to the internet or not. There are some functions that that app can do within your phone whether you're connected. So PWA kind of lives somewhere in the middle where it still can be downloaded, um, and it allows you to have some offline interactability just like an application does, but it also allows you to access this through a browser. So you don't have to have a dedicated app on your phone. It's still browser based, but it allows you to do some functionality even when you're not online. That's not a particularly great explanation, but hopefully it gives you some idea of
Yeah,
why PWA is important.
yeah. And I guess with the sophistication of browsers, that offload of functionality, that preload of functionality, that gives you, a lot more app-like features,
Yeah, the speed is one of the
um,
primary reasons that you want to be doing
mm,
looking at PWA.
mm,
Yeah,
which is really good for SEO, I would think.
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And user experience, essentially.
Yes.
User experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't ask about like the app ecosystem in Adobe. Obviously, Adobe is a top Gartner e-commerce platform, no doubt about it. Really, really robust. But what does the ecosystem look like? So back in the days with Magento, you had these. They're not really apps; they were plugins. Essentially, you go to the marketplace and you purchase them outright. There was the idea of subscriptions was a bit was not yet sort of established. You buy these solutions and then you install them on your Magento. You hope and pray, and if it doesn't work, you start to hack it. You sort out the issues, probably in collaboration with the developers. What does it look like now, particularly with the cloud,
Yeah.
in that ecosystem?
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what you would do. You would hope and pray that the extensions that you selected work with your existing platform, and
Exactly.
it's gotten a lot better. But I think, as you say, it has migrated from this one-time fee of here's our extension. They're also called modules, to subscription based, and that came out of really, of course, everyone wants recurring revenue, but it also allowed the developer to provide ongoing services and upgrades to the extension so that you wouldn't have
Mm,
to worry too much about whether it would break on the next update, because you're keeping
mm,
it up to date as Adobe continues to upgrade the version from 2.2 to 2.3 to 2.4. And in theory, if the developer is staying on top of it, their extension will go along with Adobe's migration. And what's interesting is Adobe itself is going to be starting to develop additional functionalities for the Adobe Commerce platform, but they are going
mm,
to essentially create them as subscribable um, subscriptions for that functionality for your e-commerce platform. So a lot of it, while it's not technically going to be a SaaS platform, a lot of the functions that you can add to your Adobe Commerce platform will be SaaS add-ons. So it's an interesting shift,
right.
but definitely the way that it's going, because it allows those functions, like I said, to be continuously updated on your behalf, rather than having to download the latest and having to upload it to your site, and again hope that it doesn't break on the next update.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. We could go on and on and on. And yeah, we'll just go on and on and on. But just to wrap up, I'd like your take on two things. First is, we started out with these monoliths, monolith e-commerce platforms that were a lot of the time, self-hosted or on-premise hosted, however we like it, and there's been this, rapid evolution to or migration to the cloud, and we're also seeing some organizations cutting back from the cloud and saying, okay, no, these particular modules within our e-commerce infrastructure have to be on premise just due to security. What are your thoughts on the future in regards to where e-commerce, platform in technology will go? The future of e-commerce platform would it continue to be in the cloud? Do you think it'll come back on premise, or self-hosted, or or somewhere in between?
I think it's going to be more and more in the cloud. um, I think that that is going to become the most affordable environment, and it's going to be interesting to see if some, because I don't know if you've had this experience, but even in the past year or so, I've been surprised to see that Facebook went down for a day, or Instagram, or um, you know, I don't, AWS websites in a particular region of the country went
Yeah.
down. So there are risks, and I think that it's just going to be a balancing out. Nothing is perfect, but I think that on balance, the cloud environment offers the greatest value and the greatest availability and scalability. So I think that is going to be where the hosting world is going over the next more and more over the next few years.
What about apps? Do you think with Adobe's latest innovation on SaaS apps that are continuously updated, that that again will be just the future of services? These are almost microservices in that sense.
I think so. Part of me wants to kind of react to that and say, no, like I want to own my record. I want to own my music, but, or I want to own my e-commerce code. But I see that more and more companies are willing to give that away in the interest of ease of use and allow a centralized company to manage the technology for them.
Hmm.
I honestly don't know. I think there is a great deal of value in owning your own e-commerce experience that you're providing to your customers. But I think, unfortunately, it will be coming with a higher and higher price over the next years, um,
Hmm.
especially as these SaaS platforms become more and more sophisticated. So I think what you're going to see is this kind of middle space, is going to really evolve this headless idea and these APIs and those interconnections between marketplaces and channels. And that messy middle is going to be very interesting to watch. The enterprise scale, like big companies, they're always going to be doing their own things with the big
Hmm.
name, technology providers. Small guys are always going to be looking for SaaS, ease of use, intuitive, platforms. It's the messy middle that is going to be the most interesting, I think, to watch over the next
Hmm.
5-10 years.
Yeah, I do think that agility is the name of the game, regardless of where you are. From a enterprise value standpoint. COVID happened, and the most agile retailers were able to do curbside, pickups. So they were able to activate e-commerce and get people to to pick up in store. They were able to adjust their kiosk ordering, click and collect, all of that stuff. And then on the lower end of the scale, there were supply chain issues, but they were available. Their websites were available on SaaS. It's really just been there, right? But yeah,
That
great.
convenience, I think, is being
Absolutely.
able to flip on the switch and say, okay, I
Mm,
can do Bopis right now, or I can do a new shipper, right now, and
hmm.
that's where the SaaS platforms and their apps, their modules,
Yeah.
that the ease of use of getting that functionality so quickly is like you said, very
Mm,
agile. Yeah,
mm, mm. And it really depends on what your operational capabilities are, because technology should serve operations really. And if your strategy and your operation dictates that it's same day delivery, then the technology should support that
yeah.
in every respect, whether it's a front end or whether it's the last mile tech. um yeah, just thoughts. thoughts thoughts. On a final note, we're in 2022. We're recording this on the 29th of March, 2022. The last time I checked, inflation rates were 6-8%, 6 to 8%, both in the US and the UK. There's a war at the moment. There's still chain constraints. Shipping sea shipping is an all time high. I heard there was intervention by the federal government in the United States to curb the high shipping
The
rates. I don't
gouging.
know
Yeah.
whether anything was done. but yeah, what's your outlook for commerce, for retail in 2022?
Well, I think I have to put the shipping challenges a little bit aside because that is so complex and global in scope and so interdependent on so many different governments and companies. That's exceptionally complex. Assuming that that gets ironed out, I think e-commerce is just going to get bigger and bigger. What I see is two interesting trends actually. One is the commoditization of the customer and of products, but also kind of greater personalization. It doesn't seem to make sense, but I think that the personalization is coming through AI and more of this kind of automated marketing tools rather than really kind of qualitative, deep knowledge of your customer. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I just think that that is a trend that's going to continue because there is a great deal of efficiency that can be found there. On the flip side, I think you're going to find consumers who are tired of that commodification and they're going to be looking for the most unique offerings that they can find that aren't these big brands, that are these Kickstarter companies, or are these Etsy artisans, or are these direct-to-consumer startups. So it's really the market is, I would say, more democratized. I think the mainstream will likely go in that more of the commoditized vein. But I think there's this very interesting space for small artisans and creators to really capture a unique audience for themselves, all through
Mm,
e-commerce, I think.
mm. It's a great leveler and enabler, and this past few years have been testament to it.
Yeah.
Right, Tim. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the 2x e-commerce podcast show. For viewers who want to find out more about IronPlane, I believe your website is ironplane.com. That's IronPlane.com. I will link to it in the show notes. Are you active on social media platforms? I believe we're connected on LinkedIn.
We are, yes. I'm on LinkedIn, and ironplane.com/Tim has a little card about me, but because my last name is a little bit of a challenge to spell, but you can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Fantastic. A pleasure having you on the 2x e-commerce podcast show, and thank you.
Likewise, Kunle. Thank you very much.